Okay, class, welcome for coming. Today we are going to create a Andy Warhol design using Photoshop. Actually an Andy Warhol image, okay? First thing we're going to do is we are going to take our Marilyn Monroe image and give it, identify it on our layers. We are using layers and paths, and we might need to use history if we need to back up or go forward. By the way, this image is a public domain image. I did a great deal of searching, and yes, I did find a few images of Marilyn Monroe that were public domain. So we'll trust that that's what it is. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate a couple of these layers. I'm going to click on the layer that's blue. I'm going to hold my control key down and I'm going to duplicate a layer. This layer I'm going to call contrast because we are going to create a contrast image. Be nice to spell that correctly. Okay, there we go. And I'm also going to create a halftone image. So let me duplicate the layer and type in the word halftone. A halftone is an image that is composed of a series of dots. Today we use pixels. Back in the day we used little dots, also known as Ben-Day dots, really popular with Roy Lichtenstein as well as Andy Warhol. I'm going to go to the filter here and I'm going to go to pixelate, color halftone. I'm going to put in 4 pixels, say OK, and there's that look that I'm trying to achieve. Now it's really strong, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using this tool here throughout the demonstration, opacity, and I'm going to go ahead and take it down so that you can actually see the other image behind it. But you have that look. This is what I want to achieve because most of the work that was done back then in pop art in the 60s had a halftone dot. Okay, so I'm going to turn this halftone off and I'm going to go now to the contrast and turn that one, and I'm going to take the contrast, or the contrast layer rather, and I'm going to use the levels, Command L, and I'm going to contrast this image out. I'm going to drop out the highlights to get a very distinctive look, and then I'm going to darken it up to get that look that Andy Warhol was so indicative of, or the Andy Warhol image was indicative of. Okay, now we've got what we want. I'm going to turn this off and turn this one on. And now let's go ahead and create our first layer. So I'm going to click on the bottom here, that little tiny little page, and I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to type in flesh tone because, or flesh, because the first part I'm going to work on will be the face. So I'm using the pen tool here, very important tool used by people that work in graphic design or digital imaging. It is one of my favorite tools. I've been working with pen tools since they've had all these programs out. Before, back in the day, we used rapidograph pens, we used triangles, and we used French curves. And those would help us give the curves that we wanted. The curve that I'm creating right now is known as a Bezier curve, which basically means to manipulate. Okay, so I'm going to get my direct selection tool, which is the white tool. I'm going to select this outline. I'm going to go to paths. You can see the outline there. I'm going to make a selection here. 1 pixel radius selection, there it is. And go back to my layers and we have to put in a tone. But before we do that, we have to convert this whole thing to a CYMK or CMYK color. CYMK, don't flatten, is, just say okay there, is the 4 colors that we use in full color printing in graphic communications. Okay, so I'm going to use this red, believe it or not, and I'm going to fill it with that red, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So we go to Edit, we fill. I'm going to be filling with the background color, say OK, and it looks pretty red, doesn't it? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to once again use the opacity up here, and I'm going to drop that back to get that look that I want. Right about there. Good. Okay. and deselect it. Next layer that I'm going to create will be the hair. Double click on that little name and change it to hair. Take my pen tool and I will start to now create the mask for the hair. By the way, as I'm using the pen tool, let me give you a little bit of history about Andy Warhol. When he was doing all of his looks back in the 60s, he used primarily all photographics. He did not use any intense technology. Photographics, film, he used an X-Acto knife to cut out his masks. This is known as a mask that I'm creating. And he also used one of my favorite printing processes, screen process printing, otherwise known as silkscreen printing. He was a master at creating this look. I don't think he was the best screen printing artist, but the look combined with screen printing made it very unique. Real recently, one of his pieces, the Seven Elvises, went for an incredible amount of money. I believe it was $50 million. So even though his work looked very rough and avant-garde, it's still, people loved it. Okay, I've completed my path. You'll see a little O when you're done with your path. I will make a selection. There's the path, as you can see, and I'm going to make the selection 1 pixel. Okay, and now I will put that yellow in there. So I'll go to Edit, Fill, Foreground Color. Okay, and I know that it looks kind of weird, but once again we are going to be using the opacity, and we're going to drop that like that. Okay, deselect it, and let's move on to the lips. So what we're going to do is type in, oops, we don't want that. We want lips. Okay, and let's go ahead and create the lips. So we're going to get the pen tool, and I'm going to gradually draw, or excuse me, trace this layer. Okay, and then I'm going to also create the layer within inside of the mouth. We completed the path. Now I'm going to take the direct selection tool. I'm going to use my shift key, and I'm going to hold down the shift key and select both of them at the same time. I will go to the paths, make that selection, and I will fill with that red at the bottom, so, or in the background. So fill, background, okay, and back to the layers and back to the opacity. Drop it back a little bit. There we go. And we've got our lips. Last thing I'm going to do, one more layer here, and we are going to create eyeshadow. Kind of feel like a makeup artist. Okay, now make sure I'm on the eyeshadow layer, and I'll just be the makeup artist and put on some eyeshadow on Marilyn here. Yes, Andy Warhol was an incredible artist and illustrator. He started working for an advertising agency, and his account were creating ads for shoes, and he did a lot of illustration back in the late 50s, and then he started to create his art. Okay, there we go. I'll use my direct selection tool like so, and make my paths, make my selection, okay, And let's go ahead and find a color. I want to use a powder blue, something like this. Go back to my layers, make sure I'm on my eyeshadow, edit, fill, foreground, okay. Drop that back with the opacity once again. Something like that. And now we've created the Andy Warhol look. Let me go ahead and put the halftone on there. And there we go. Well, we've completed it in Photoshop. Looks pretty good. I'm pleased with it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in class.